I wonder if the poet themselves might not be the last person in the world who should be performing their work. There are a couple of reasons for this. One of them is that, at least speaking for myself, the process of writing poetry is an incredibly private one. And by that I don't necessarily mean too intimate to share with other people, so much as just in very literal terms, I have to be alone. I have to be interacting exclusively with my own thoughts. I mean, to such a degree that my ability to produce new work, and produce new finished work in particularly, requires prolonged periods of isolation. I have to be away from other people to the best of my ability in order to get into a headspace where I can really, really focus in and get a particular piece of work done. Part of that for me is that the process of writing involves a very intensive personal dialogue, talking to myself, allowing my ideas to bounce off of my ideas. The amount of adaptation required to interact with other people runs contrary to that process, interferes with that process. I think it's no coincidence that you look over the history of the personal lives of poets from history, and isolation is a common theme. The most extreme example of which would be someone like Emily Dickinson, but Edgar Allan Poe, also very socially isolated. John Keats withdrew himself from the company of others often, and for prolonged periods of time. Writing poetry is a way of addressing the world that demands some separation from it. And so you take the setting of a classical poetry reading, and you are putting a person who by necessity is at least somewhat introverted, and are asking them to emote, to inject feeling and expression in a social context into work that was produced alone. See, the thing is that a given poem, for somebody listening to poetry or reading poetry, they are experiencing it already in the world. They are experiencing that poem as part of the world. But for the poet themselves, that poem was probably written in separation from the world. They have a fundamentally different relationship with it than anybody else, which is not to say a better relationship. I'd say, if anything, the person who can view the poem as part of the world, rather than a testament to distance from it. If anything, they are at the advantage. And if anything, I'd be inclined to say they're getting the better experience of that poem.